Okay, welcome back. Now we are done with the small intestine and we're going to move on to the large intestine. So if you recall, I said the small intestine, the ileum ends in the right lower quadrant. So that's where our path is going to start. But I want to show you how it looks inside a human being. So here's the last part, the terminal ileum. And then our large intestine is going to go from the right lower quadrant up to the right upper quadrant, across in a transverse plane to the left upper quadrant. Going to go down the left side. And then it's going to make this S-shaped curve, before it comes back in the midline to go back out. So if you look at it on the model, you can kind of see it going upwards and going across, and then it's tucked back here. And you can't really see, but the midline part is right in there. So let's go ahead and get started. And as you might expect, there's another sphincter to control the release of the small intestine contents into the large intestine contents. So this is at the junction of the ileum with the large intestine. Only this one we don't call a sphincter for some odd naming reason. It's been called a valve. So it's called the ileocecal valve because it's telling you the names of the two structures, just like gastroesophageal sphincter told you the two structures. Okay. And so when you are looking for it on the models, basically the first part of the large intestines open up and you can see on the inside, which is what I've done with both of these models. And so it's represented by this area here, by the white line on that one. And then just this general area right there. That's where the ileocecal valve. So maybe you have noticed this is the small intestine coming into the large intestine, and actually part of the large intestine hangs down inferiorly to it on both of these. Here's the small intestine coming in, there's the ileocecal valve, and this whole piece is hanging down. And so the part that hangs below the level of the ileocecal valve is called the cecum. This is the first place where food enters the large intestine. After this, what it's going to do is going to go up the right abdominal wall. Oh, I forgot to talk about that. Hanging from the cecum, do you see this little wormy-like structure? We've got this number 1 on over there, and over here, this little worm-like structure. That's your appendix, sometimes called the vermiform appendix. Okay, in real life, it doesn't hang down like this. This would be like way too easy. It's usually kind of tucked behind the cecum, or it's tucked behind and over. It's not just hanging out in clear, easy view like this. Okay. All right. So now we are ready to leave the cecum and travel on our pathway. We will go up the right abdominal wall in what is called the ascending colon until you run into basically the liver. At the liver, you have to take a left-hand turn and go in a transverse plane. And so that part of the colon is called the transverse colon. And you'll do that until you hit the spleen. Okay, now notice on the model, they're showing the transverse colon is in this beautiful transverse plane, but look at the person on the left. You see how it hangs down? Yeah. Gravity, dudes. It doesn't sit directly across like on the model. It's got a little scallop look into it, but it's going to go from the right upper quadrant and loop down and make it up to the left upper quadrant. Gets very close to the spleen, and then it has to take a turn to go down the left abdominal wall and what's called the descending colon. And everything is hunky-dory until you run into the ileum of the coxal bone. It's like, dude, you're in my way. And so what the descending colon does then is it takes a little S-shaped curve. Do you see that little S-shaped curve? That part of the colon is known as the sigmoid colon. The sigmoid being the Greek sigma, the Greek letter for S. After the sigmoid colon, you are done with colon, okay? But 7 and 8, we're not there yet. On the one on the right, number 6, that's the sigmoid colon. But don't be memorizing numbers because you know come on test or a quiz, those numbers are going to be covered up. You're not going to be able to rely on your numbers. So understand it. So just like the small intestine was attached posteriorly to the blood vessels, so is the colon. But we're not going to call it the mesentery on the colon. We're going to call it the mesocolon. And that's how you know whether it's small intestine or large intestine. So let's look at the models first before we look at the cadaver. So on this colon, all we have is colon going over here. And so all this fatty stuff with these beautiful red blood vessels going to the descending colon and the sigmoid colon on that side, or to the ascending and transverse colon, all of that stuff is the mesocolon, because it's bringing in arterial branches, and then it has venous branches leaving as well. So on the bottom model, that's just another model that we see. And so the bottom arrow is showing the exact same area where we have the ascending colon over here and the descending colon over there and the transverse colon across the top. But what's good about this view that you can actually see behind that loopy transverse colon, and you can see that there is mesocolon that attaches from behind the transverse colon as well. Now, switching over to the cadaver picture, what they've done here is you have your transverse colon going across the top. So this is your transverse colon here, going from below the liver, cruising over to below the spleen. And so all of this is your mesocolon. Okay, yes, this would be mesocolon too, because this is your descending colon, your sigmoid colon over there. But they've only highlighted basically the mesocolon going to the transverse colon in that particular picture. All right, there's some other structures about the large intestine. You knew the large intestine could be quite that easy. All right, so I don't know if you noticed, but did you all see those stripes? Okay. See the stripes on the colon? Yeah. So a colon in real life, going around the circumference, there are actually 3 stripes in the 360 degrees. But one of them is where the mesocolon attaches, so you only can see 2 of these stripes. And so these stripes are going the length of the colon. So if you look, whoops, switch slides. So if you look on the left side where you have the tissue from the cadaver, look at this upper picture. Okay, so yeah, I know we got fat hanging down there. But do you see these linear stripes right along in here, which is highlighted in the bottom picture? Those are these things which are these painted white lines on the model. And so each of those is called a Ileocecal. And so sometimes you'll see the word spelled like this, and sometimes you'll see it with, whoops, with an I-E-A-E, which is actually the plural form. And so I just was pointing out here that you actually can see 2 different ones, because if you start in the ascending colon on the right side where the yellow arrow is, if you follow this Ileocecal, it would be on the other side of the transverse colon. And so the black arrow is pointing at a different Ileocecal. And then if you look at the distal part of the transverse colon, you have all this yellow stuff, which hopefully, what do you think that is? What was it that was hanging down from the colon and from the greater curvature of the stomach like an apron covering everything? That's right, it was the greater omentum. So do not get confused. The greater omentum is anterior. The mesocolon is posterior. All right, now we have something else we're going to learn about, and that is the name of all of these little outpouches. Boop, 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 boop. Okay, I know the sound effects, okay, aren't very good. Excuse me. Let me use that 4-letter word. Each one of these little outpouchings of the large intestine, which are very easy to see in the models and can be seen in the tissue as well, each one of these is called a haustrum. A haustrum. All right, so that's pretty much it for the colon. However, we are not done with the large intestine, because there's one more part of the large intestine that is retroperitoneal, 100% retroperitoneal, and in the midline below the distal end of the sigmoid colon, and this is called the rectum. If you are looking at the piece of colon in the midline and you can start seeing like these little shelfy things, that is the rectum. And with that, we are done with the large intestine, and food is still not in the toilet yet. I mean, the waste products, not the food, the waste products are not in the toilet yet. We've got one more area to cover, which we will do next. So thank you for continuing this exploration of the digestive system and for all your hard work learning all these weirdly spelled words.